Welcome back to Scotty's Hobbies. In this video, I'm going to show you there's four speeches that were made on the Senate floor today about House Joint Res 87, 88, and 89. They're making their way through the Senate pretty darn slow, but finally they spoke about these House Joint Resolutions on the Senate floor. Before we get too far into this video, please hit that like button, subscribe, hit the ring bell, check out the video library for other emissions deregulations videos, and a ton of helpful DIY automotive videos if you're working on your own vehicle. Brakes, tune-ups, emissions locations, a ton of stuff. Today, we had four speeches. Was it four? It was four. You had one in favor from John Barrasso, Senator John Barrasso. He mentioned, or his argument was that the EPA the Biden EPA should not have granted these waivers at the last minute on the way out the door. And also, his argument is that we need a choice of vehicles, not just EV. We don't need an EV mandate for either personal vehicles or Class A vehicles, which is 100% true and accurate. Trust me. Then, in opposition, you're going to have Senator Alex Padilla. He's kind of a weasel. Then you have Senator, Sheldon Whitehouse. He goes over more facts about what CRAs are, what rules they should be applicable to, and covers what the GOA thought about these CRAs in regards to these House Joint Resolutions, as well as the Senate parliamentarian, what their take was on these CRAs. Last, you have, Adam Schiff, another weasel, but make sure you get all the knowledge you can about what is really going on. Personally, I don't think these House Joint Resolutions are going to end CARB. What I think that these House Joint Resolutions are going to do are actually just end the waivers that were granted to CARB through the Biden-era EPA in December. In one of my last videos, I mentioned that I don't know how CRAs are applicable to, I believe it was HJ Res 89, because that rule, or what do they call it? Not a rule, I forget what they call it. That decision was granted to the CARB back in 2023, which is beyond the time frame that CRAs can be applicable to a rule. I went over that in one of my previous videos. Now, I've rambled on for long enough. Let's go into all these speeches and let me know what you think about what is going to happen next, how fast it's going to happen, and just any of the process. If there's something out there that I'm missing, please comment below, give me some links, and I will go check them out. Here we go.
Mr. President, on another matter, in 2024, in November, on Election Day, voters demanded more economic freedom and less government overreach. President Trump and Republicans in Congress heard them. The state of California did not. California wants to export its radical and impractical electric vehicle mandate to all 50 states. California's mandates are a progressive power grab. They dictate what cars and what trucks Americans can buy and can drive. These mandates aren't limited to California. They are calculated to control the policy of the entire nation. Congress must now act to protect the rights of the American people to drive the gas-powered vehicles that they want to drive. Last week, House Republicans, with 35 House Democrats joining all of the Republicans, voted to defend that freedom and to defeat this California mandate. And it's now up to the Senate to finish the job. California mandates spread far and wide. They affect 133 million Americans, nearly 40% of the population of this country, and here's why. 12 states copy the California mandate to ban gas-powered cars by 2036. 10 states copy the California mandate to ban gas-powered trucks by 2036. And these include large population states like New York. Even the junior senator from California admits that California's liberal mandates affect the entire country, and he says he's very proud of it. The American people think differently. The Washington Post reported last month that Americans are losing interest in EVs. That's the quote. Washington Post, Americans are losing interest in EVs. Interest in owning an EV has dropped 8% since 2023. The message is clear. Americans don't want these EVs, even when government tries to bribe them into buying them and using them. People want to buy the car or the truck that works best for them and where they live and the life that they lead. The average price of an electric vehicle is $62,000, which is $16,000 more than comparable gas-powered vehicles. California mandates that the Democrats are pushing would raise prices even more. It would also limit options. This isn't progress. This is a policy that punishes working families, punishes farmers, punishes truckers, punishes the people that live in rural areas. Worse, EV batteries rely on China. 80% of the EV battery components come from China. Republicans here in the Senate are fighting to end America's dependence on China. The California mandate, supported by the Democrats, makes that dependence even more dangerous. It risks our safety, it risks our security, and it risks our strategic independence. The Biden administration used its final days in office to grant California permission to export its EV mandate across the country. They did just 1 month before President Trump took office. They already lost the election. They already knew the American people rejected what they stood for. And yet they still tried to push this onto the American people and are trying to push it today. This is midnight meddling. Senate Republicans are ready to use the Congressional Review Act to stop it. We'll protect Americans' rights, the rights to purchase a gas-powered vehicle. That's what we're fighting for, and we have every right to do so. California's mandates have already taken root in a dozen states. They affect 40% of all the new light-duty vehicle registrants and a quarter of the new heavy-duty vehicle registrations nationwide. They clearly affect the kind of vehicles which will be manufactured and sold in America. These California mandates affect the cost and the availability of gas-powered cars and trucks all across the country, even in the states that do not adopt the mandates. To my Democrat colleagues who will tolerate California controlling what Americans can drive, do you think the American people really support what you're trying to shove down their throats? No, they don't. No wonder the Democrats lost the election. Were the Democrats willing to strip consumers and small businesses their right to choose the vehicles that work for their needs and for their budgets? The Democrats want to continue to protect the failures and the fallacies of the Green New Deal? Or for once will the Democrats join Republicans who are trying to protect working families? It's no surprise then that Republicans have become the party supporting and protecting the rights of working families. People have rejected the Democrats. The Senate also needs to reject the cheerleading by these climate extremists for more regulations by unelected bureaucrats, but that's what the Democrats are here supporting. The Senate should use the Congressional Review Act to reject this Joe Biden midnight madness. By doing so, we will be protecting consumer choice, protecting affordability, and protecting congressional authority. It's time to put Americans, Mr. President, back in the driver's seat. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
Senator from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, when Donald Trump returned to the White House a few months ago, there's a whole lot of people throughout California and beyond that knew that California had a target on its back. For more than half a century, we've been trailblazers in a number of policy areas, but especially in the fight for environmental protections and public health protections. And for the last decade, we've been proud to, shouldn't have to, but been proud to stand up to each and every one of Donald Trump's attacks on our clean air and clean water, not just through his rhetoric, but through his actions. So while the particular procedural battle that we find ourselves in today over the Clean Air Act waivers may be new, the larger war on California's climate leadership, and progress is not new. Thanks to the Clean Air Act, for 50 years, California has had the legal authority to set its own emission standards to protect the health of our residents and our natural resources. This authority was granted by Congress on a bipartisan basis in recognition of California's unique air quality challenges, but also its capabilities as policy leaders. But today, Republicans are threatening to distort the Congressional Review Act and the CRA process in an effort to slow down our progress. Now, one of the most outlandish things I've heard from my Republican colleagues these past few weeks, well, as it pertains to these Clean Air Act waivers, is that they're concerned that these waivers and other regulations would stifle the California economy. That, quote, the market is not ready, end quote. Or I've heard some say that they're concerned that this could raise prices on consumers. Really? These are the same Republican members who have stayed silent on Donald Trump's imposed universal tariffs that are actually already increasing prices. So now you're worried about increased costs for American families? Where have you been these last several weeks? But I have some good news for you. In case you haven't heard, California's proven this argument wrong already. You know, in recent years, you heard me reference time and again that California was the 5th largest economy in the world. Well, as of a couple weeks ago, California is now the 4th largest economy in the world. Imagine that. Policy leadership, climate leadership, and economic growth. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. We can and must focus on doing both. Now, California didn't get there by just holding on to technologies of the past. We did so by innovation and investment in clean technologies. So we are proving that you can be for clean air and for business and economic growth. But I want to be clear in this discussion that it's not just why Republicans are trying to undermine California's climate leadership. It's worth emphasizing the concerns of how they're going about it. This session, colleagues, I have the honor of serving as the ranking member of the Rules Committee. I want to make sure that everyone understands what this proposed abuse of the CRA process would actually do here. Because you see, the Clean Air Act was passed under regular order. So if Republicans want to amend the Clean Air Act to address California's legal authority, bring it up for a vote. But Republicans aren't bringing it up for a vote because they don't have the votes to do so under regular order. So instead, they have to try to figure out a back door to avoid the legislative filibuster. They want to kill California's Clean Air Act authority with a lower 51 vote threshold. In plain English, they're trying to change the rules of the Senate in order to please Donald Trump and the big oil lobby. So let me share another bit of news for you in case you haven't heard it. The Senate parliamentarian has already decided that this is not allowed by Senate rules. The parliamentarian's determination, which I'm happy to share with anybody who's interested and hasn't seen it, the Senate parliamentarian's determination came after the independent and nonpartisan Government Accountability Office said that the EPA and Republicans were twisting the rules in their effort to target California twice. There was a bill introduced around the time of the GAO's findings and before the parliamentarians' findings. A Republican bill sponsored by the now chair of the Energy and Natural Resources Committee and the Environment and Public Works Committee. The fact sheet for this bill says, and I quote, California's power to influence national emission standards is not subject to congressional review. End quote. Republican bill, Republican fact sheet. That's the purpose of the bill, because they know that you can't do this through the CRA process, as some are now proposing to do. And yet there's still others in the Republican conference that are insisting on moving forward. So let me remind all of us, on both sides of the aisle, the Senate has never overruled the GAO or the parliamentarian on a CRA question. So it's clear to me that this is about more than just California's climate policies and leadership. This would set a major new precedent that blows way past the bounds of the Congressional Review Act. It's not an insignificant change to the rules. It is not an insignificant precedent that you would be setting. If successful, it would open the door to ignoring the parliamentarian on any ruling that you don't like. And if Republicans can ignore the parliamentarian on a CRA, then why not the tax bill that they're working so hard on, or health care, or anything else? But luckily, I'm holding out some hope because I have come across some remarks by several Senate Republicans with respect to the impact on the rules. You see, earlier this year, the majority leader said that ignoring the Senate parliamentarian would be, quote, totally akin to killing the filibuster. We can't go there, end quote. This is on the public record. The junior senator from Utah said that, quote, a red line for him is overruling the parliamentarian, end quote. The senior senator from Maine said she would, quote, never vote to overturn the parliamentarian, end quote. So for other members who have not taken a position on whether or not they would overrule the parliamentarian or not, that the recognition of it being akin to eliminating the filibuster, that's a red line that maybe you don't want to cross, maybe you do want to cross, but I will call our attention to the fact that the red line is here now. And each member of this body has a decision to make. The parliamentarian has ruled that this effort cannot be done on a 51 vote threshold. And if you choose to go forward and overrule the parliamentarian, just know there's no going back. All bets are off. And with that, Mr. President, I'd like to yield to the ranking member of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, my colleague and friend from Rhode Island.
I'm actually happy to yield to Senator Schiff of California, so the delegation can, okay. He's happy with me going, so I'll go. First, both of my colleagues from California are here.
Yeah, I want to recognize the senator from Rhode Island.
And I want to thank them for coming to the floor today to talk about this important matter in which Republicans want to appease their donors, and they want to break basically 2 Senate rules in order to get there, not just one, but 2. The underlying matter here is about a law, the Clean Air Act, which falls in the jurisdiction of the Environment and Public Works Committee. So that's why I'm here. A different law, the Congressional Review Act, creates a fast-track procedure in the Senate to disapprove agency rules. For the most part, that Congressional Review Act, the CRA, is focused on rules during a short period immediately after they're made final and before they go into effect. We get a window where we can disapprove the rule from Congress. As soon as an agency finalizes a rule, it submits the rule to the Government Accountability Office, and to both houses of Congress. That starts a 60-day review clock. That CRA also provides a look-back period where a Congress can reach back into the final 60 days of a previous Congress and review rules from a prior administration. The waivers go way back before the CRA period. Generally, there's no question what constitutes a rule under the CRA. There are different acts that the government can do. There are decisions, there are rules, there are laws. A rule is a specific thing under the CRA. Sometimes there are problems. Sometimes agencies don't submit actions to Congress that have typically been deemed rules. And sometimes, as here, they submit as rules actions that have never previously been considered rules. GAO polices whether the submitted action was in fact a rule. That's the law. That's a GAO legal responsibility. GAO has weighed in about 60 times in the history of the Congressional Review Act. When GAO determined that the action involved was a rule, the action was then deemed submitted, and the review clock started. When GAO determined the action was not a rule, that was the end of it. Congress stood down. No one moved a CRA resolution of disapproval following a negative finding by the GAO. Never. Which brings us to this first oddity. In 2023, members asked GAO whether an EPA Clean Air Act waiver decision for California was a federal rule for purposes of the CRA. GAO said no, correctly, because it wasn't. Like every other time, that settled that. And GAO's no comported with the text of the CRA and the waiver provision originally in the Clean Air Act that created the California exception, and 50 years of agency precedent treating waivers as decisions, a different type of adjudication which the Administrative Procedures Act distinguishes from rules. EPA itself, across multiple administrations, Republican and Democrat, never called waivers rules under the CRA, not even under the first Trump administration. Then in February, after much lobbying by the oil industry, the Trump EPA submitted notices of 3 waiver decisions, one from more than 2 years ago, far beyond that 60-day look-back period. Upon a request from the 3 of us, the 2 senators from California and myself as ranking member, GAO confirmed its previous 2023 opinion not long ago, this is not ancient history, and found that, notwithstanding EPA's politically motivated submissions to try to get into that CRA window, the California waivers simply are not rules. So the CRA does not apply. GAO pointed out to EPA that the waiver notices on their face indicate that they are decisions rather than rules. But that wasn't enough, so we had to go to the parliamentarian who heard arguments and debate from both sides, and the parliamentarian affirmed GAO's decision. I'll offer the opinion that it was not even a close call, because the unblemished record has always been that this is not a rule over decades. The parliamentarian ruled that Clean Air Act waivers do not qualify for expedited consideration under the Congressional Review Act. Every other time the Senate has reached this point, every other time members have respected the decision of the parliamentarian, and that ended the matter. Not this time. This time, a faction in the Republican Party wants to overturn decades of precedent, ignore the GAO and the parliamentarian who are the lawful guardians of this process, and steamroll forward in violation of the plain text of the Congressional Review Act by deploying the nuclear option. Once there is precedent that anything an agency does can be considered a rule, the time and scope limits of the Congressional Review Act have no meaning. Any agency action ever could be swallowed up in the new Congressional Review Act definition. Think about how the Trump administration might abuse this. At least one member of this body previously asked GAO if FDA's decision to allow pharmacies to dispense mifepristone qualified as a rule for the purposes of the CRA. GAO said no, and it ended there. If we overrule GAO and the parliamentarian on the waivers, nothing stops the Trump FDA from submitting the decision as a rule and members from introducing a disapproval resolution and proceeding through this new loophole. Everyone knows by now that President Trump has a beef with a whole host of media outlets, some of which are licensed by the Federal Communications Commission. What's to stop the FCC from submitting, say, CBS's license as a rule, and members from introducing a disapproval resolution? Is this really the path we want the Senate to go down? A future Democratic administration could submit every oil and gas lease issued since 1996 as a rule and pursue disapproval of them under the Congressional Review Act. Colleagues, we've already given away too many Article 1 powers to the executive branch. Do we really want to give the executive branch this power to submit anything and everything as a rule and allow members to hijack the floor with CRA resolutions? That would be a new way for this Senate to work. Then there's the question of overruling the parliamentarian, the nuclear option. The import of overruling the parliamentarian extends way beyond Congressional Review Act resolutions. Once you've overruled the parliamentarian on a legislative matter, there's no going back. All bets are off. Any future majority would have precedent to overrule the parliamentarian on any legislative matter. There is no cabining such a decision. It is tantamount to eliminating the filibuster. Once you give a mouse a cookie, it never ends. Pretend all you want that these waivers are exceptional or that any precedent overruling the parliamentarian will be limited. That is not the way it works. Soon, some members will think their thing is exceptional and push to use this precedent. And on it will go if you give the mouse the cookie. You'd be upending 50 years of treating preemption waivers as agency decisions and not rules, 30 years of deferring to the GAO and the parliamentarian on what constitutes a rule for purposes of the Congressional Review Act, and centuries of Senate precedent and procedure. All that while there is actually another path. In 2019, the first Trump EPA used the administrative process, the Administrative Procedures Act, to withdraw a previously granted Clean Air Act waiver that permitted California to set car standards. So I ask my Republican colleagues, is this worth it? Is it worth going nuclear in the Senate to accomplish something that the EPA could try to accomplish under the Administrative Procedures Act on its own? Is it worth going nuclear, knowing full well the Pandora's box this will open? I'll close with the advice my colleague California shared from the Majority Leader, the senior senator from South Dakota. He said earlier this year that overruling the parliamentarian would be, and I quote him, totally akin to killing the filibuster. We can't go there. People need to understand that. So please, do understand that and don't go there. I yield the floor.
We got him lined up, Adam. You little pencil neck.
Mr. President,
Senator from California is recognized.
I thank the gentleman, Senator Whitehouse, for his remarks. He has been our environmental champion in the Congress for many years, and he led the effort to insist that the Senate follow the rules when it comes to protecting our environment and when it comes to preserving the power of the parliamentarian. Mr. President, this is downtown Los Angeles in 1955. It was the post-war era with the rise of the personal automobile, the baby boom, and the rapid expansion of American cities and suburbs in the West. Suddenly, millions of families were experiencing firsthand, and for the first time, the most serious environmental impacts of unchecked industrial and manufacturing activity. Many could not walk through the streets of our cities without handkerchiefs to their face. The iconic Ford and Chevy automobiles of the 1950s and 60s kept their roofs shut. And in some cases, the smog was so bad that people mistook it for a chemical weapons attack. And here's the thing, it got worse, not better over the coming decades. President Trump often speaks of restoring America, of making America great again, taking us back to that post-war period with the rapid economic expansion and runaway prosperity of the wonder years. Well, his tariff wars have ended any hopes of an economic boom, and he now has the country headed in exactly the wrong direction towards an economic bust instead. And if he and Republicans get their ways in the coming days, our nation and our air will be on a trajectory back to 1955, all right. We will make an America where our spacious skies will be clogged and smoggy, and our Purple Mountain's majesty will be hidden behind a haze that comes with letting oil companies call all the shots in Washington. Back then, in reaction to these horrific air conditions, as well as devastating oil spills and other environmental hazards, California helped launch the modern environmental movement. In 1966, California became the first state to regulate tailpipe emissions to tackle this smog head on. In fact, some of our biggest achievements and biggest actions took place under Republican governors. And wouldn't you take action? I mean, look at this. If this was your city, if this was your state, wouldn't you take action to deal with air pollution this bad where you can barely make out the skyline, the skyscrapers? We're a body of lawmakers, many of whom, like me, served in state legislatures before coming to Congress. If you saw your state's school children being choked by smog like this, wouldn't you see it as your job to step up, regardless of party politics? That is the fundamental right of any state and its legislature. In the face of threats against your own kids and your own families, you do something. And that is what California did and has continued to do, so often setting the standard for the rest of the country. We in California are 1 out of every 10 Americans. We have a right to protect our citizens, our environment, our ability to live. After all, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are all impossible if we can't breathe. In the 1960s, through the Clean Air Act, Congress granted California the ability to set standards for itself when it comes to air pollution. Under Republican President Richard Nixon, we even formed the Environmental Protection Agency. Through Democratic and Republican administrations and Congresses, that authority and promise has been upheld. Nearly 60 years of environmental protection has made the Golden State the gold standard for protecting our planet. But now Republicans in Congress and Donald Trump are willing to ignore their own promises to punish California and to reward big oil. They are trying to break the Senate rules to make California's air dirtier, to make it harder and less safe for Californians to breathe, all to please the oil industry. That's just wrong. And don't take it from me, we can't go there. That's what Senate Majority Leader said about the prospect of overruling the parliamentarian merely 5 months ago, as did his Republican predecessor, who said abiding by the ruling of the parliamentarian is central to the functions of the Senate. The Senate parliamentarian, he said, is the final word. And please, if they try to tell you this is not overturning the parliamentarian, you must not believe them. The parliamentarian has ruled. This device, this mechanism cannot be used to overturn California's waiver and its ability to set its own air standards. This ruling from the Senate's independent referee has been explicit and direct, and it should be respected. Now, I realize I'm a newcomer to the Senate, and I will not ask my colleagues to stand on the long traditions of this institution, which I barely know. But they must stand by their commitments. They must stand by a state's right to make its own laws to protect its own citizens. If the Senate goes nuclear, overruling the parliamentarian, there is no telling where the Congressional Review Act will be used in the future by Republicans or Democrats. Could the Senate merely vote to wipe out an entire 4 years of actions taken by a previous president? Will your state's regulations be next? What about your state's funding, your state's ability to administer programs like the Clean Water Act? Precedent can be a hard thing to make tangible. But this is our history. This is what awaits us if we go down this dangerous road, air like this. We will not stand idly by as this administration fights to make California's air unhealthy again. We will fight this. We must. I yield back.
All right, that was exciting, right? A ton of information. I know you guys just were right on the edge of your seat the whole time, right? It's really, really boring to listen to these people go back and forth. They weren't really going back and forth, but to present their arguments in favor or in opposition. It's like, let's just get going. Like, I want to see what's going to go on. I want to get to like 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, and see, is smog shops really going to shut down? What do you think about that? Are they going to shut down? Let me know. I really appreciate you guys watching my videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the ring bell, check out the video library. I will see you guys on the next hopefully helpful video. Thanks for checking out Scotty's Hobbies.